I discovered the terrifying secrets of my creepy neighbors. Prepare for unbelievable chills. I never should have opened that door. I stand by my own front door, the creaks in the wooden floor echoing the unsettling silence. It was just another ordinary evening, or so I thought. The fridge hummed softly as I poured a glass of water, the sound accompanying the dull thud of my heart. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, throwing long shadows across the street. It felt cold suddenly, like a damp fog had rolled in. The lights in the neighboring house flickered, casting strange shapes that danced across my living room wall. The Johnsons lived down the block, always kept to themselves. I heard whispers, unusual sounds at odd hours. A crash here, a thud there. I shook it off, just my imagination running wild. Right? But those shadows didn't match the modest lifestyles I thought they led. The air thickened as the sun disappeared completely. Something scratched at my mind, gnawing at my curiosity. What was going on in their home? The wind howled, rattling the window panes, sending chills racing down my spine. I stepped to the window, peering into the darkness. There a flicker of movement. A shadow darted past their front porch. My heart raced. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. There it was again. Figure tall, hunched. It moved strangely, almost glided. I staggered back, my breath hitching in my throat. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The scratching at the back of my mind turned into a whisper. Screaming, "Look closer!" I glanced back at the kitchen, where light spilled through from my own home. The knife block gleamed ominously. Then, a loud bang shattered the night, coming from the Johnsons' house. My heart thumped wildly. The curtains shifted, and I saw another shadow. This one was different, larger, more menacing. A clap of thunder rolled overhead, adding to the confusion. Layers of apprehension wrapped around me. Could I just ignore it? Pretend I hadn't seen? But I couldn't look away. I took a cautious step toward the door, hand trembling on the knob. The whispers grew louder, swirling around, blurring my thoughts. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, a desperate, haunting sound that gripped my chest. Was it real? Was it part of the nightmare? I turned back toward the door, feeling another presence looming behind me. My pulse quickened. I opened it just a crack, and all I could see was the void of darkness. The air turned stale, stagnant. I swallowed hard. This wasn't merely curiosity anymore. It was a plunge into dread. What awaited me just beyond that crack? I pushed the door wider, and there, in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. My breath hitched as I stood frozen in place. A figure emerged from the darkness, eyes glinting in the dim light. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure stepped forward, its outline distorted and flickering as though it were a flame desperate for oxygen. The glint in its eyes felt like shards of ice digging into my skin, chilling me to the very core. As I stood paralyzed, I realized it was a woman. Her hair dripped like ink, framing a face pale as a ghost. Blood smeared across her forehead, dripping down her cheek like broken promises. She opened her mouth wide, a silent scream that echoed in my mind long after it was gone, a mash of terror and desperation. My instincts screamed at me to slam the door shut, to barricade myself from whatever horror stood before me. But I remained frozen, entranced by her gaunt features, the abject suffering that lurked just beneath the surface. "Help," she mouthed, the word barely slipping past her lips, as if the weight of it was too much for her to bear. The shadows around her shifted like live worms, coiling and twisting, feeding off her fear. I glanced back towards my brightly lit kitchen, the warmth feeling miles away in that instant. like my safety net fraying at the seams. Then, as if responding to my flicker of hesitation, the darkness intensified, swallowing the last bit of fading daylight. The whispers turned into a chorus, rising and falling like a song I couldn't understand, yet deeply embedded in my bones. "Come closer," they coaxed, the promise thick with evil allure. I fought against the pull, gripping the doorframe with white knuckles, but darkness was relentless from the corner of my eye. I noticed the flicker again in the Johnsons' window, a pair of figures, clinging to the glass like moths drawn to a flame. They watched with hungry eyes devoid of humanity, their smiles impossibly wide, showing rows of teeth that seemed more like fragments of sharp glass than anything organic. "Help us," the woman urged again, her eyes rolling back as she slumped, her body bending awkwardly, an unnatural position that made my stomach churn. An invisible force pulled her toward the darkness at the edge of my property line. The air thickened with tension, like the moment before a thunderstorm where everything holds its breath. I tore my gaze from the haunting scene, and it hit me. Was this all a trap? Were the Johnsons somehow involved? Their laughter, echoing like the hounds of hell, clawed at my sanity. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but I knew all too well that no one would come. I was all alone in my own suffocating nightmare, with furious resolve. I stepped onto the porch, encouraged by the mystery of her request, yet dread curled like smoke in my lungs. I approached her slowly, fear coating my steps as shadows swept over the weathered wood. Just as I reached her, light surged around me, and her eyes bore into mine, dragging me into a pit of darkness. "Beware," she rasped, the words slithering away before I could comprehend them. "Find the truth underneath." And then she completely vanished, swallowed by the night like a whisper lost on the wind. Silence reigned for a moment, a deep, echoing stillness that felt heavy in my chest. The flicker of light from the Johnsons' home dimmed dramatically, leaving nothing but a sickly darkness, impenetrable and thick. But from that void, something crawled closer, something unfurling from the shadows with a sound like damp soil breaking apart. Fear washed over me as I realized that I was not alone. Whatever haunted those walls was now free. A chill crept down my spine as a grotesque shape twisted into form, two jagged silhouettes emerging, grotesquely intertwining. A nightmarish blend of human and something else, a primal creature, birthed from the depths of horror itself. My heart raced as their eyes settled on me, an insatiable hunger swirling within their depths. And just as the world tilted and I felt myself drawn into that darkness, the ground beneath my feet crumbled away, and I plunged into an abyss of terror. Before I even hit the bottom, I realized the whispers were not just in my mind anymore. They were saying my name. I landed in a cold, clammy pit, the ground yielding beneath me, a morass of mud and horrors just beneath the surface. Panic gripped me as I gasped for breath, the damp air thick and choking, swirling with the scent of decay. Instinctively I scrambled to my feet, pushing against the slick walls of my subterranean prison, only to find that the darkness clung to me, refusing to relent. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, mingling sinisterly with the faint rustle of movement around me. I turned slowly, anxiety threading through the fabric of my thoughts. As the whispers began again, a cacophony of voices overlapping, weaving in and out like threads of a cursed tapestry. Find the truth, help them. In the hollow they slithered over and under each other, tantalizing, like insects darting in the dim light of a dying sun. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, shadows writhed and twisted at the edges of vision. Their forms ebbed and flowed, and I caught glimpses of significant shapes, something pacing just outside the reach of light, a massive, hulking figure with glimmering eyes. I could feel it watching, considering me like prey. The earth beneath my feet crunched, gravel scattering as I attempted to escape closer to the wall. But it gave way, exposing a narrow tunnel sloping downward into even deeper darkness. Instinctively, I hesitated, the idea of venturing into unknown suffocating me with dread. I glanced back once again to the heavy shadows, the shapes still undulating and convulsing. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the flicker again. A soft illumination appeared at the end of the passage, pulsing like a heartbeat, dragging me toward it. Compelled, like a moth drawn to flame, I began to slide into the tunnel, my heart pounding to a rhythm of fear. Each inch I crawled felt like eternity, dread wrapping around my spine with icy fingers. The whispers intensified, now fueled with a sense of urgency. You must know, beware, uncover the past. It was as if they were guiding me, pushing me deeper into whatever hell awaited. The light grew brighter, and with it came images vivid and piercing, bursting forth in chaotic succession. I glimpsed the woman again, her gaunt face twisted in anguish. Dark shadows hovered around her, sinuous and hungry, as she grasped at the air, groping for something just beyond her reach. And then I saw flashes of the Johnsons cackling in a grotesque display, their teeth gleaming like shards of glass, surrounding something unrecognizable, obscured by a veil of shadows and whispers. "Help them," she cried, her voice breaking through the chaos, filled with desperation and hopelessness. "Stop the cycle or they will find you," I pressed on, grasping for understanding. But the light began to pulse, a vibrant cadence that made my heart race uncomfortably. And without warning, the visions halted, replaced by the stark silence of the tunnel, only to be engulfed once again in complete darkness. Out of the silence, a tapping echoed, rhythmic and insistent, like a heartbeat urging me onward, relentless in its demand. I approached the source cautiously, my senses heightened, and as I stepped into an opening, I stumbled upon an altar of unspeakable horror, a twisted collection of bones and heirlooms, remnants of lives long since vanished. Lay scattered among them were photographs, faces of people, their eyes wide with dread, their mouths stretched in silent screams, as if begging for release. Then, the tapping became frantic, frenzied, as if they were trying to free themselves, and suddenly the faces began to shift and contort, merging into one grotesque visage. I fell back, scrambling to escape, but as I began to retreat, an icy hand shot out from the darkness, twisting around my ankle, a grip of pure malice, dragging me toward the altar. "Help us!" it hissed, the chorus of voices now a singular torment echoing in my mind. Panic surged through every fiber of my being as I fought against it, the weight of ages pressing down on my soul. "Find the truth!" they shrieked, and then the darkness exploded with light, blinding and searing, pulling me into its depths as I felt the ground shift again beneath me. I plummeted into nothingness, their cries ringing in my ears, my own name swallowed in a tempest of darkness, as I tumbled further into despair. And then the hand released me, and I fell into an abyss where only echoes of my screams remained. In that vertiginous void, I faced the chilling realization that the truth awaited yet with it, the certainty that darkness hungered, and my fate was already woven into the fabric of something ancient and unutterably evil. In that instant, everything stilled, and I held my breath as the laughter erupted once more, an all-encompassing symphony of joy and terror, echoing into the blackness. And then, something cold and wet curled around my throat, a whisper of warning. "You are one of us now." The pressure of the void released its grip, and I gasped for breath, the icy air slicing through my lungs like shards of glass. I lay on cold stone, slick and damp, the remnants of my terror swirling just beyond my reach. What felt like solid earth crumbled beneath my fingertips, revealing more bones, too many bones. I was entombed in a sepulchre of shadows, each shard of light a taunt, illuminating the grotesque mosaic of lives extinguished long before my arrival. My heart thundered in my ears as I struggled to stand. Panic surged like a wild river, urging me to flee from the suffocating remains of the dead. But as I lifted my gaze, what awaited filled me with dread. The chamber was alive with whispers again. The desiccated bones around me began to shift, a terrible intimacy taking hold. New forms emerged from the shadows, faceless entities that breathed darkness, towering over the bones with hollow eyes that penetrated my very soul. "Join us," they murmured in voices that slithered around the remnants of the altar. Desperate to comprehend, I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. The silence swallowed me whole. Panic surged like poison, and I turned, charging into the gloom, stumbling down a passage that felt increasingly labored. Somewhere ahead, light flickered fitfully. I crashed through the dark, my fingers scraping against the cold stone walls, desperately seeking the warmth of escape. Each step seemed to amplify the tension, the whispers seeping into my mind, dragging me further into their melancholic embrace. You'll find the truth, but first, you must listen. Each voice was a thread, weaving familiar yet haunting tales around me. The woman, her anguished features flickering between shades, clawed from the depths of my consciousness. Stop the cycle. It lives. It eats, she cried, and for a fleeting moment, I felt the warmth of her presence wrap around me. A promise of salvation even amidst the horror. But that warmth faded, replaced by gnashing teeth and muffled laughter echoing from the very walls themselves. The tunnel twisted, expanding and contracting. Had I stumbled into some ancient maw, ready to swallow me whole? The flickering light grew nearer, pulsing in tandem with my heart as it echoed the laughter of the damned. Then suddenly my foot slipped on a slick surface. I tumbled forward into the light, crashing into an expansive chamber. I gasped, rolling to my knees, my skin prickling with an unnatural chill. Enormous figures loomed above giant shadows cast by an immense fire that danced in a pit, illuminating a grotesque spectacle. Surrounding it were the Johnsons, their crazed grins illuminated by the fire, their limbs adorned with leather and bone, as they indulged in a feast that left little to imagination. Suspended on hooks before the flames were writhing figures. I recognized them, the faces twisted in torment. They were the same faces that had populated the photographs, brought to life in a horrible celebration of suffering. They are offering your truth. One of the Johnsons cackled, lunging toward me, the fire reflecting off their sharpened teeth like a swarm of glinting daggers. No, I shrieked, scrambling backward, but a glitch in reality froze me in place. The air thickened with malevolent intent, and as I shivered before the primal glow, the woman's voice resounded again in my mind. You must save them. In that moment, everything twisted. The laughter stopped, and the fire flickered ominously. The shadows danced in a grotesque spectacle, as if they were readying for a performance, drawing me deeper into their monstrous embrace. Join us, echoed the chorus from the shadowy enclave, their faces shifting to reflect my fear, contorting into a mockery of my own visage. Then, with a violent surge, the walls began to constrict, pulsating around me as if alive, a beast awakening. The altar at the center began to shake violently, and out of the crack in its stone emerged dark tendrils, slithering across the floor toward me, pulling at my consciousness. Seeking to break free, I lunged toward the exit, but a shadow lunged ahead, blocking my path, a monstrous face with the features of those lost staring back at me, eyes wide with a malevolence that surged through my veins. Don't leave us! It howled, and the room erupted into chaos as the walls whispered their names, ominous, haunting, weaving my identity into their dark tapestry. I stumbled back, crashing against the altar as my chest tightened, my mind racing. What truth must I uncover? Outside, I could hear the refrain of the Johnsons cackling blend with a storm of chaos, growing louder, consuming the chamber with their grotesque celebration, a defiant scream of joy as shadows beckoned me closer with fingers of darkness. Suddenly, everything stilled again, and all eyes turned toward me, the silence deafening, and with a single synchronized breath, they spoke in unison, sending shivers down my spine. One of us now, or you shall become them. As I turned to flee, the ground beneath me cracked open, revealing a yawning pit of darkness with no end. A frightening invitation I could not refuse, dragged deeper into the abyss, where the truth lay entwined with horrors beyond imagination. My heart raced, pleading desperately as I teetered on the edge. Then, unexpectedly, the woman's voice returned, raw and desperate, cutting through the chaos. Remember, only you can sever the bond. And without warning, a blinding light erupted from the chasm, searing through the darkness, forcing me to confront what I dreaded. In an instant, the shadows clawed at my feet, dragging me into the gaping maw. The last thing I saw was the horror-stricken faces of the Johnsons, twisted in anticipation of my fate. I gasped for a final breath, but the abyss swallowed my scream, devouring it whole as the harrowing truth awaited me in the darkness below. Yet another chapter remained ensnared in its ghastly embrace. The void enveloped me, pulling me down into its cold embrace. My body trembled, and I felt time distort, stretching like a darkened shadow around me. Sinking deeper, I gasped, clawing at the air that closed around my throat with that same icy grip. The brilliant light flashed and faded, replaced by pulsing darkness. Laughter echoed horribly familiar and maddeningly close around me like ethereal snakes writhing in the cold. Suddenly, the sensation of falling abruptly stopped, and I landed with a sickening thud. The ground beneath me was rough and gritty, and with hesitance, I lifted my trembling hand to feel my surroundings. To my dismay, what I touched was neither solid earth nor cool stone but something slick and warm. I recoiled instinctively. Blood. The ground was saturated with it, the metallic scent flooding my senses, awakening a primal fear nestled deep within my core. Bile rose in my throat as I scrambled to my feet, the wet squelching sound echoing in the stillness around me. Shadows clung to the walls, pulsating against the minimal light. My heart raced, pounding in sync with the whispers that began to circulate once again. Softly charging the air with secrecy, "Join us, join us." The refrain morphed into one chilling echo, rolling over me like a wave of despair. A desperate urge to escape drew me forward, a path illuminated by flickering torches lining the thick stone walls. They danced with a life of their own, revealing fleeting glimpses of the grotesque symbols carved into the surfaces. They appeared to be remnants of an ancient tome, an incantation echoing across the ages. With each step, I felt the weight of those departed souls pressing upon me, whispering their regrets in my ears. I could practically feel their breath upon my neck. The flickering diminished as shadows coiled closer. A figure darted from the intensity of the dark, forming before me a gaunt creature with lifeless eyes, its visage a twisted reflection of humanity. I fell back, desperation churning in my stomach. "What do you want?" The creature's mouth opened, yet no sound emerged. Instead, I was met with an overwhelming vision. Faces distorted in agony enveloping me. Their mouths open in silent screams, the very same faces I had seen on the hooks, feeding the flames of insanity. "Feed. You must feed," the figure whispered, its hollow longing reverberating in the dank air around me. "No, I won't." My defiance felt feeble against the tide of dread that surged forth. But its gaze pierced through the fog of horror, a dark pulsing energy gathering like a tempest about to explode. The temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath curling around me like smoke. Running now felt futile. I sensed something far darker lurking just beyond my reach, not just watchers but predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. I bolted forward, heart hammering, only to collide with an invisible barrier that tossed me back. My breaths came rapid and shallow, panic flooding my veins as I scrabbled against the unseen force. The sneering laughter of the Johnsons manifested above me, echoing in sinister delight, drawing my attention upward. The room shifted, dimensions reshaping and forming spirals of malice. As I saw them perched like harbingers of doom atop a dais, hooked into the darkness itself. Their grinning faces contorted in joyous abandon, as if relishing the game that was unfolding, the hunt for the truth, for a soul teetering at the brink. "Do you wish to see?" One of them sang, their chant weaving into the air with unholy sweetness, wrapping around my chest like a binding yoke. "The truth of your flesh, your regret. All of it." They held fingers aloft, and nails cracking scratches, like claws, raked through the air, drawing shapes that turned into visages I knew too well, my loved ones twisted in the throes of despair. "No, stop," I shouted, fighting to keep my sanity against the onslaught of memories that threatened to drown me. Each face sent shockwaves of pain coursing through me, tearing through illusions of safety and peace. "You want me to join them?" Faltered. In this pit of festering secrets, they mocked, "You shall either feed or be sacrificed," consume their memories, or let theirs lead you to your doom. A shiver ran down my spine as the walls began to pulse ominously, seemingly alive with gluttonous hunger. The shadows tightened, squeezing me, feeding off my fear. In a moment of clarity, I grasped the truth. The abyss had chained me not just as a witness, but as a willing participant. The walls were speaking, their language a cacophony of dread. Emerge as the devourer, or be devoured. With a sudden violent rush, the creatures lunged toward me, the gaunt figure and the shadowy forms coalescing into one monstrous entity, a being of pure horror. I ran, screaming as the darkness strained against my limbs, hungry hands grasping, holding tightly, drawing me into the fray of their madness. Just as I felt the weight of that darkness bearing down on me completely, a blinding light erupted from the depths of that shadowy creature, forcing me to confront the incredible impossibility of the truth once more. Yet before I could discern what lay within the blinding brilliance, a wrenching howl pierced the air, and the ground broke beneath me, sending me spiraling into a newly opened chasm that yawned wider than any abyss I had known. The Johnsons laughed behind me, as the last of my footing crumbled away. Just before I vanished into the blackness, the flicker of the woman's face resurfaced, and she screamed in warning, "The bond cannot be broken until the past feeds the present. Remember, only you." And then, in the inky depths below, something stirred, something far more malevolent than even the horror I had witnessed. My scream, lost in the vast emptiness, reverberated as another sacrifice was made, another story to be told. And I was caught somewhere in between, trapped within the narrative with nowhere to turn. The chasm swallowed me whole, a wave of darkness that drowned the last remnants of light. I plummeted, weightless, as if time itself had lost all meaning. My body turned and twisted in the engulfing void, disorientation gnawing at my senses. The coldness seeped deeper into my marrow, heightened by the echoes of laughter that danced cruelly through the air, taunting me. Mocking my struggle, suddenly, I landed harshly on a floor slick with something wet and warm. The smell hit me first, a reeking cocktail of decay and despair that clawed at my throat and burned my nostrils. Gasping and choking, I rolled to my side, heart racing as I struggled to grasp the reality that surrounded me. Dread weighed heavy in the stagnant air, the walls pulsating with whispers, a chorus of voices growing in intensity, threading through my mind like barbed wire. Join us, breathless. I forced myself to look around. The space was constricted, lit only by a sickly green glow pulsating from iridescent ooze seeping down the walls. I found myself in a cavern adorned with grotesque formations resembling twisted skeletal remains, some suspended in the slimy substance as if entrapped in a grotesque dance. The walls were crawling, yes, crawling with a mass of tiny creatures, resembling humanoid faces, their mouths gaping wide as if caught in some unending horror. "They feed, we feed," one face screeched, its features warping grotesquely as if it could sense my fear. My insides trembled, a visceral wave of sickness crashing over me. Trembling, I pulled away from the spectacle, gaining my feet, my only thought a frantic desire to escape. That's when I spotted it, a flickering light at the far end of the chamber, illuminating another portal. Its glow seemed inviting, yet a quaking ember of fear warned me there was no comfort in this realm. With shaking legs, I stumbled forward, desperate to reach the exit. The pulses of the walls and the murmurs grew louder. They were alive, aware of my presence, and the suspense thickening in the air sharpened my instincts. Suddenly, I felt a sharp tug at my ankle, followed by a caustic hiss. Glancing down, I saw one of the creatures wrapped around my leg, its grotesque form emerging from the dripping ooze. Its flesh was a sickly shade of gray, the contours writhing and shifting as it opened its mouth, a gaping void filled with jagged teeth that glistened with hunger. "No! Leave me!" I shouted, shoving my other foot down hard on it. But the creature only tightened its grip, a sinister glee evident in its trembling body. Panic consumed me, the throbbing laughter of the Johnsons echoing through my thoughts as I realized their malevolence was only a taste of the true horror around me. As I struggled, I felt the rippling energy gathering, curling back over my skin, the dread of the pit coiling tighter. The faces on the walls began to scream, their anguish seeping into my mind, suffocating me with their despair. I was suffused with the weight of their regrets, muffled cries and whispered warnings crashing inside my skull. Stumbling back, I fell to the ground, helpless as the creature lunged, its jagged teeth snapping mere inches from my flesh. With a desperate howl, I grasped the nearest object, a twisted bone fragment jutting from the earth, and thrust it into the creature's mouth. Its screech echoed with an unnatural chill that set the room quaking. In that violent moment, time fractured. The world warped and twisted as the cavern's walls heaved violently, now revealing a swirling void beyond them, an endless flash of sickening horror. The bone fragment quivered violently in my grasp as if compelled to choose between its own survival to remain within this hellish dimension or to betray me. Yet something within the chaos drew my attention anew, a familiar face appearing in the blur of shifting shadows. It was her, the woman from before, now trapped within the writhing mass of faces, her eyes wide with terror as she reached for me. "You have to remember," she gasped, her voice cracking. "Reconnect the threads. We will guide you, but the choice can only be yours." A surge of energy pulsed through the ground beneath me, a resonant call encasing the very air I breathed. My soul felt tethered to them, an embodiment echoing my own fears, desperation, and regrets. The faces were alive, each one an extension of my torment, clawing for recognition and vengeance. "Remember the bond, break it," rang out the last syllable of her voice, a bell tolling an unearthly echo in the dark. Before I could comprehend, the entire cavern erupted with sounds, screams, and laughter combining in a symphony of horror as I was thrust to my feet, the ground shifting dangerously beneath me, alive with the weight of souls. Then, rotating as if on an axis of pure terror, the walls began to converge. The laughter grew into a monstrous crescendo, transforming into a single unholy voice that bellowed in unison. "Feed me your truth, or be consumed by it." Just as the walls snapped together like jaws about to close, the light surged once more, bright and blinding. I felt the force tugging at my being, pulling me towards the black. And then I saw it, a figure cloaked in shadow, parting the harried mass of bodies, pointing right at me. It was the Johnsons, grinning, blood-covered smiles twisting into something far more grotesque. "Join us. Become part of our legacy." And in that instant, their laughter shattered the remaining will in me as the very ground opened further beneath me. I was falling again, deeper into the unending night, towards an unseen fate that whispered of more than just horrors of choices yet unmade and secrets yet unveiled. Would I be reborn, harnessing the legacy they offered, or doomed to feed the desires of those long trapped? And then I vanished. The darkness swallowed me anew, a consuming vastness devoid of hope or understanding. The laughter faded, though I felt its remnants tickling my spine, a chilling reminder that I was not free, merely cast into a different layer of this unnerving reality. I landed softly this time, a disorienting disparity that set my instincts on edge. This was not solid ground. It was like lying on a cushioning mass, shifting beneath me with each breath. I pushed myself up, scanning my surroundings. I was in a chamber that pulsed with bioluminescence, a grotesque garden where the shriveled, skeletal remnants of once living things unfurled long, cerulean tendrils that writhed like snakes. As I steadied myself, I noticed that each tendril seemed to quiver in anticipation, aligning towards me, searching. My heart raced. They were seeking connection, and their desperation resonated like a sickening pulse in the air. "Come closer, dear," a voice, silky yet tainted with rot, swirled through the air. It danced around me, wrapping me in its suffocating embrace. "Unravel with us, be part of our splendid tapestry." "Stay away," I cried out instinctively, scrambling back. But the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. Shadows swirled around the edges of my vision, coalescing into lingering figures, their forms flickering with an ethereal, ghostly light. They were remnants of those who had come before me, souls ensnared in this realm, forever searching for their release. One figure broke away from the others. It approached, cloaked in tattered threads, each layer shimmering with hidden stories. I gasped as the rags fell away, revealing the woman's face from before the one who had tried to guide me. "You must remember," she urged, eyes wide with intensity. "It's in the choices you make, understand the weight of your truth. The Johnsons are a part of this cycle. They bind all those who falter." Behind her, I noticed the growing horde of writhing tendrils drew closer, unleashing ghastly whispers. "Join us, share your secrets with the collective." The shadows of the Johnsons shifted behind her, sneering as if they were licking their lips in anticipation. They weren't just observers. They were the orchestrators of this horror, each twisted face a testimony to the lives they had consumed. "You are just like us," they taunted, their voices overlapping in a sinister harmony. "They will devour your truth, just as we did. Surrender, and let us live on through you." The empathy in the woman's gaze struck me fiercely. "They seek your fears, your guilt, draw on them. Use them against the darkness surrounding you." Desperation clawed at my throat as the haunting laughter coiled tightly around me. I could feel my memories flaring back, the scrapes and bruises of my past, the choices I had made that haunted me most prominently, and those marker moments where good intentions twisted into something grotesque. I balled my fists, teeth gritted, trying to recall the emotion I had locked away, the sorrow I refused to confront. "Embrace it," the woman urged, her presence flickering in and out of view. "Only by acknowledging your truth can you reclaim your essence. The darkness will feed on any denial." The tendrils recoiled as I faced my memories, the weight of regret cascading over me like a deluge. They whispering words clawed at my sanity, fierce in their urging. "Feed us. Feed us your guilt, your fear." I felt a shimmer of empowerment as I leaned into the memories, my despair rising, becoming palpable. In that moment of vulnerability, I screamed into the dark, "You want my truth? Here. You who swarm like locusts, take it." The shadows twisted in delight, greed radiating from the Johnsons' gnarled smiles, as I extended my arms, releasing a tempest of sorrow that roared like a storm through the chamber. Their voices erupted into a cacophonous wail, shrieking as my past storm tore through them. Yet, amidst the chaos, the woman's countenance morphed, her expression shifting from urgency to horror. "Stop! You don't know what you're inviting." The haunting call of the Johnsons enveloped me, thrumming, with power, yet something in her tone twisted my stomach. I realized the truth was not a meal to be swallowed. It was a tether that connected me to this forsaken realm. Just as the tendrils surged, pulling me deeper into the swirling madness, I felt an icy grip on my shoulder. In a shock, I turned to face a new figure standing behind me, cloaked in a heavy shroud that shimmered like a starless night, the stranger's face obscured. "There's no escape from this cycle, dear soul," it whispered, its voice an invocation, a promise and a curse. "You will either join us willingly or by force." Before I could process the revelation, the ground trembled, and the very fabric of this nightmare began to unravel. Just long enough to glimpse a doorway, an aperture shimmering with the same sickly green glow from before. Instinct kicked in, and I lunged towards it, propelled by sheer desperation. But as I neared, the shadows surged forth like a tempest, their lost souls clawing at my limbs, attempting to drag me back into their abyss. "You cannot leave. Your truth is ours," their chorus wailed, carried by voices that echoed with lifetimes of suffering. And just as I felt their grip tightening around my ankles, the door flickered, threatening to close. In a final gasp, amid the painful cries and the blinding pulsations, I lunged forward through the opening, and vanished once more into the throbbing void, with the last echo of the Johnsons' laughter ringing in my ears, promising that this torment was far from over. I descended again, this time through a shroud of darkness that felt malleable, like thick smoke curling around me, stinging my eyes as I plummeted. There was no sense of direction in the void. It had a life of its own, swallowing me into unfathomable depths. Just as the panic began to choke me, I landed with a thud on a cold, damp stone floor. The chill seeped into my bones. Gritting my teeth, I slowly gathered myself, painfully aware of the heavy silence surrounding me, pressing down like a weight. I reached out a trembling hand against the slick wall, feeling the texture of cold, wet stone. Carvings etched into the surface resembled faces twisted in agony, their mouths agape as if frozen in a scream. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through a distant opening, I noticed shadows lurking at the fringes, darting just out of sight. A putrid scent invaded my senses, decay mingled with something darker, a fetid odor that conjured flashes of grotesque images, of things festering and waiting. "Those who come here they should never have," a voice rasped, low and tainted with a malevolent edge. It sliced through the silence like a knife. I spun around, every hair on my body standing on end. There, just beyond my reach, stood a figure wrapped in tattered cloth that clung to a gaunt frame. Its lips curled back into a leering grin, revealing teeth that looked more like shards of broken glass. "You seek truth?" It cackled, sending shivers down my spine with its dreadful mirth. "You stumble blindly through the darkness while it beckons you deeper. They all do. Who are you?" I stammered, forcing the words past the constriction in my throat. "Just a whisper of a soul, caught in this eternal morass," it answered, stepping closer. The shadows swirled around it like a cloak, growing thicker with every movement. "But it's you I'm interested in, dear one. You carry the weight of your past like chains. You should let go." With a flick of its wrist, tendrils emerged from the floor, undulating and writhing towards me, hungry for warmth, for essence. "Embrace your mistakes and become one with the darkness. They offer release, freedom from the burdens you yourself have placed upon your heart." I recoiled, the instinct to run surging through me. As I did, the figure erupted into laughter, sound echoing around the chamber and melding with the whispers of unseen voices, urging me to relent. "You can't escape, sweet child. The darkness has tasted your fear and will not give it up. Those who reject it are simply consumed instead." Suddenly, the air froze, and chaos erupted around me. The walls seemed to pulse with life, the faces carved into them shifting, their expressions morphing from fear to rage. The tendrils lunged forward, and 100 hands made of shadows reached for me. I felt fingers brushing against my skin, trying to burrow beneath it. "Run!" shouted a voice, distant yet desperate. The woman from before her warning glimmered in my mind, creating an anchor point of clarity against the spiraling terror. I pushed forward, dodging the thrashing limbs, navigating the heart of the entangled horror, the laughter fading into the background. Each step felt like wading through syrup, my energy draining with every passing moment. "Foolish child," the ghastly figure roared, its voice splintering into an echo that gnawed at my sanity. "You will return. You cannot escape your fate." But I had to try. With ragged breaths, I stumbled forward to the chamber's heart, its floor pulsating beneath me. Before me loomed a gaping maw, a dark portal swirling ominously, drawing me closer as a siren-esque song of despair danced on the edges of my consciousness. The whispers shifted tone, becoming more urgent, beckoning. "Step through, dear. Leave behind the weight of a forgotten world. Join us, and find peace in the eternal." I hesitated, the allure of escape tangling with the fear of yielding. But just as I wavered between choice and temptation, the shadows erupted into a frenzy, thrashing against the stone, shrieking in a cacophony of anguish. Then, in that fleeting moment of indecision, I felt a powerful tug at my heart, an icy grip that pierced through my chest like daggers. I turned, eyes wide, and saw through the swell of bodies a familiar face, beckoning with outstretched hands. "Please, let me go," I screamed, lunging toward the light of the portal. But just as I reached it, an unseen force yanked me back. The darkness coiled around my limbs, suffocating me with despair. And then, in the eye of the swirling tempest, the figure transformed. Its face, once a deranged grin, morphed into that of my own, my visage twisted in agony, laughing hysterically. "Join me," it intoned, as the world around me collapsed, the reality of my own darkest fears congealing into a sickening embrace. Panic surged through me as I screamed, the sound of my own voice echoing back, and in the final breath before I slipped into the all-consuming void, I forced myself to face the mirror of shame that reflected every horrible choice I'd made. The screams faded, the walls around me buckled, and as I plunged into that suffocating darkness, I realized with gnawing horror that I had just opened the door to something far worse. The suffocating shadow of my own soul was now on my tail, ready to claim me at last. I awoke on the same cold stone floor, bewildered and gasping, yet the terrible sense of dread weighed heavier than before. The air was thick, oppressive, fragranced with the lingering taste of decay, as if the very ground had been steeped in misery for centuries. The flicker of light from the entryway had dimmed, casting elongated shadows that danced like malevolent spirits across the chamber, heart drumming. I pushed myself up, every inch of my skin prickling with a visceral awareness that I was not alone. The laughter that had previously taunted me now surged in taunting echoes, mingling with the whispers that slithered through the room, wrapping around my mind like a noose. I pivoted slowly, scanning the dim abyss around me. Did you really think you could escape? The voice, now multiple, coalesced from the shadows, hollow and mirthless. Darkness is patient. It waits for you to tire. My breath quickened as I searched for the exit, but the walls seemed to shift. The dim light flickered again, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught something, a fluttering, ethereal form, a shadow of black against black, flitting just beyond the threshold of visibility. It slipped seamlessly into the stone. As my heart raced in steady, horrifying recognition, this place was alive, and it fed on my fear. A rustling began, a skittering sound creeping closer, weaving its way through the oppressive quiet. I turned as a wave of shadows surged from the far corner, morphing into grotesque shapes. They coalesced into twisted apparitions of figures I thought I'd long left behind, faces I'd betrayed, friendships tarnished, all drawn from the deep recesses of my memory, adorned with expressions of anger and sorrow. Abandon hope, one of them hissed, a specter of my former best friend, eyes hollow and gaunt. You've hurt us, and now we return for recompense. No, I shrieked, recoiling from their outstretched fingers, repulsed by their spectral presence. You're not real, not real. The voice echoed in a cruel mimicry. Look closer. Every choice, every action weighs heavy on your soul. We are but the shadows of your guilt, memories twisted by your regrets. The shadows circled me, wailing and gnashing their phantom teeth, each sound striking deep, like a hammer against an anvil. I willed myself to look away, but the images turned my resolve into ash. I felt my resolve crack under the weight of their judgments. Their voices were like cold knives slicing through my sanity. Suddenly, the ground shifted, and I slipped, tumbling down a steep incline suddenly birthed from the stone itself. I grappled for something, anything to hold on to, but all I found were more shadows. They wrapped around me like vice grips, pulling me deeper into a blackened abyss, each taste of despair tasting like bile on my tongue. The walls of the passageway plastered against me, pulsating and shifting, as though alive with a malevolent will. I clawed at the stone, desperate to retain my grip on reality, but with every inch I fought against, more figures emerged. A mother, crying for a lost child. A lover spurned. A friend betrayed, all floated around me, their eyes malignant and penetrating, as if waiting for judgment to be cast. Face your future, they hissed, their voices becoming a chorus suspended in the air, now a dreadful blend of cacophony that echoed in my head. You cannot move beyond until you have reconciled the past. I screamed in panic and swung helplessly, the shadows consuming me. The ground beneath me faded to a void, and with it, every ounce of hope flickered out as the darkness embraced me. Strangely, I began to see new things, new visions intertwined with the old. A neighbor, grim and warped, staring through curtains, whispering secrets of lives tangled and forgotten. The walls transformed, revealing flickering glimpses of twisted rooms filled with darkness where once there had been warmth. But then there was a flash, a figure standing, illuminated by an otherworldly glow, a brief beacon amidst shadow. Follow, it cried, its voice filled with urgency. Your true path lies ahead. Before I could comprehend or respond, gravitational fear surged once more, dragging me toward a bleeding abyss that teemed with haunting figures, while the glow pulsed in the distance, coaxing me like a promised salvation. Just as I prepared to run toward solace, I felt an icy grip tighten around my ankle, pulling me back into their clutches. I turned to see my own reflection in their hollow eyes, my fate mirrored in a wicked smile that sent wave after wave of terror spiraling through me. Embrace who you are, the specters crooned in unison, or know no peace ever. Their words laced through my mind, binding me to the darkness. And as I struggled against my own image, I realized with sickening clarity that the path ahead held nothing but more terror. But the only choice left was to plunge forward into the unknown, to discover the truth buried deep within the very heart of this hell. And just as the shadows closed in to feast, the portal of light flickered one last time, as the flickering visions of have always known enveloped me completely. I was flung anew, colliding with the darkness, but there was a whisper, haunting and familiar, that promised revelation in the corners of my mind. "Will you call my name?" And just before slipping away into the abyss of light, a chilling realization settled upon me. I would find myself in ways I hadn't bargained for and face a horror far closer than I had ever imagined. I landed with a jolt, rolling onto the cold stone floor that felt slick beneath my palms. For a moment, all I could sense was the thick, rancid air, stinging my lungs. It was dark around me, an inky void that pulsated with a malignant heartbeat, a rhythm that resonated deep within my core. I could still hear the whispers echoing in my head, frantic and hungry, urging me to listen to discover the truth buried beneath layers of nightmares. Slowly, I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath the weight of dread that hung thick in the atmosphere. The dim light illuminating the cavern flickered, then steadied, and at its edges, shadows danced, shifting into grotesque shapes. I took a step back, recoiling as I caught the flickering reflection of women, faces contorted with despair, shadows of the lost souls trapped here. Forever craving release, I turned, desperate now, willing myself to escape this torturous pit, only to be met with the Johnsons' grinning faces looming in the darkness. Their laughter echoed, pulsating off the walls, a cruel taunt reverberating in my veins. They were the orchestrators of this horror, the puppeteers weaving together the threads of fate with malice in their hearts. "Dear, sweet soul," one of them cooed, voice dripping with seduction. "You've come so far, but you still don't understand. You are part of this tapestry now woven into our story." "No," I cried out, clutching my head as their words struck me like icy daggers. "You don't own me." "Oh, but we do." Their synchronized laughter quaked the cavern, seeping into my thoughts, twisting my memories into a chaotic spiral. "You fed us, and in return, we have just a touch of your truth. But there's so much more to savor." A vision flashed through my mind. The woman, her gaunt visage and pained eyes imploring me to remember. Reconnect the threads or be lost. I could almost feel her presence in the air, her anguish vibrating through me. Desperate for clarity, I focused on her words. She wanted me to reclaim my essence, to confront the past, not with fear, but with understanding. That as the Johnsons approached, I could feel their malevolence wrapping around my throat, constricting with every breath. I had to break free. I had to turn their darkness against them. Closing my eyes, I urgently began to sift through the chaotic memories, the love that had turned sour, the friendships that had twisted into betrayal, and the choices I had buried beneath my pride. Shadows lurked at the edges of my vision, clawing at me, whispering the memories I had tried to suppress. I could hear their laughter, mocking my every attempt to evade them. Suddenly, something raw broke free inside me as clarity surged like a tide against the stone walls. They were not my enemies. They were echoes of my own buried guilt, the voices crying out for absolution. "Enough!" I bellowed, feeling the ground shift beneath me as I found my voice, harnessing that raw energy pulsing through my veins. "You want my truth?" I thrust my arms forward, feeling the waves of their dark energy crashing against me. "Here it is. The fear of my failures, the weight of my regrets." The air crackled, electric, and as I channeled that energy, my surroundings flickered, illuminating the twisted faces of those I had lost from my life, their eyes igniting with a haunting fire. "Release them," I demanded, finding strength in my voice, and for the briefest moment, I felt their guilt intertwining with my own, each regret feeding a growing storm of power. "No!" the Johnsons shouted, their faces twisting in anger, desperation sinking in their features. "You cannot sever the bond. You are ours." But I was not theirs. I had faced my demons long enough. The edges of their forms began to fray, tearing at the seams, as the light finally burst forth, blinding and fierce, sending tendrils of darkness writhing back. I mustered every ounce of will and screamed, "I am free. You will not consume me anymore." The light surged with renewed vigor, as if responding to my defiance, illuminating the cavernous grotesque shapes, blinding the shadows in their dance. The walls screamed in response, and as they thrashed violently, I felt the chains around my soul cracking, the weight of guilt releasing in a flood of energy that surged toward the portal that had once seemed so distant. But as I darted toward it, I glanced back only to find the Johnsons, grinning wider than ever, their mouths stretching impossibly, the shadows behind them shifting and undulating with dreadful hunger. "You'll return," they hissed, their malevolence palpable. "You always return." Then came the twist. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The cycle was incomplete. The bond was never truly severed. What waited beyond that light was not solace but the gnashing of fate's teeth, the recognition that this darkness was intertwined with my very being. An unyielding embrace. Freedom was a facade, a dream woven within the haunting whispers. I landed, breathless, at the threshold of light, but before I could cross the boundary, I felt a pull, something anchoring me back, an unbreakable tether to the darkness that begged for me to embrace it. I glanced at the faces of the damned around me. They were reflections of desires unfulfilled, of startling truths I had cast aside, masking themselves as friends, as reality. And as the laughter faded into echoes, leaving nothing but their cold breath upon my skin, I realized the truth cut even deeper. The horror I faced was not merely the Johnsons, nor the tortured souls. No, it lay buried within. "I cannot sever the bond entirely," I whispered, horror blooming in my chest, "because it is a piece of me." And as I took a step back, the final chilling truth poured into me. My heart racing, this horror was never just about the Johnsons. It was the unending cycle within my soul that would never rest, nor let me go. I may have escaped the nightmare, but the darkness lingered like a shroud around my waking mind. It smiled, knowing I was forever tethered to the depths of their desires, for as long as I lived. And in one haunting voice, I heard them whisper once more, "You are one of us now."